Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me?
Hey, Daniel.
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, I'm just getting back from a week worth of camping. And, I should turn my camera on. It's great to be back.
One of the campgrounds that we just heard all about. You went to check
No.
it out for an investment?
No. We just we went over to Nehalem Falls in Oregon, pulled into one of the walk-in spots, and we had a great spot just down by the river. And the kids played in the river for like 2 days. We started reading some Robinson Crusoe together as a family and just spent the week out by the river. It was nice. But I did come back today to find out that at 10:30 p.m. yesterday, our speaker canceled on us for today.
Oh, no.
So my plan is to walk everybody through my commercial underwriting spreadsheet. And just give an overview of how we actually underwrite a commercial property. And of course, open it, make it, let everybody here voice their opens so we can talk about other topics too. All right, welcome everybody. Good to see you, Bob. I got the link back to you a little bit earlier in the week this time. Hope retirement is suiting you well.
Sorry, I was muted. Yep. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
No, it's going well.
Good.
Did you retire, Bob?
Yep.
Congratulations.
Thanks. And it wasn't like a coded retirement. Oh, I'm going to another job. I'm retired.
You are going to another job, a much more enjoyable one.
Well, yeah. Okay.
Just different coding, that's all.
There you go.
Welcome everybody who's joining. This is the Real Estate Investment Education Club at Intel. And today is August 19th, 2022. And unfortunately, for those of you who heard just a moment ago, our speaker canceled on us at 10:30 p.m. last night. So today, I'm going to walk you through my commercial underwriting spreadsheet, which is quite a behemoth of a spreadsheet, actually. So it'll take a full hour if we want to go that route, or we can spend a little bit of time just as a club discussing. I know our discussion groups have been really interesting too. I love to hear what people are saying and just where people's heads are around the current investment environment. So why don't we open it up first of all to opens. If you have a topic that you'd like to hear in an upcoming meeting, let everybody know. You can either put it in the chat or just say it out loud. And if you have a topic that you want to talk about today, in addition to the underwriting spreadsheet, shout that out as well. We can spend some time doing group discussion and then I can dive into the underwriting spreadsheet.
I have a topic suggestion, Daniel.
Yeah.
Section 8. Section 8, typically multifamily or single family, either way, rentals.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be a good one to bring a speaker in on. I know enough to do a basic underwriting, but there are a lot of tricky ins and outs to it.
Yeah, I'm super curious in particular about kind of the trade-offs of having the more guaranteed, income source of the government side, but then dealing with all of the other, variables with regards to tenant quality and turnover and all the other kinds of stuff.
Yeah, well, I can give my 2 cents on it. We do have a property that 1/4 of the units are dedicated to actually LIHTC units, not Section 8. I believe LIHTC is Section 42. But it's a similar program where you get subsidies from the government. And a lot of what I hear, and particularly from underwritings that I've looked at, is that it's always nice to have the government pay your rent because it's going to be on time. You're not relying on the tenants to pay it, right? You're getting it directly from the government. So it comes in at the same time of the month all the time. You've got a great underwriting ability because it doesn't really change that much. So you can really accurately underwrite for a long period of time. But, it's not going to be full market rent. It'll be a couple of $100s per unit below whatever your market top rent is. So there's a trade-off between the stability of that rent that's being paid every month and the fact that it's lower. And there are more, of course, turnover costs. Section 8 tenants will either be in a location for a very long time, or if you have turnover costs, they're going to be higher. And some people actually have a business around purchasing Section 8 units that are about to expire or will expire in a couple of years. So there's a whole value add strategy amongst people who buy apartment complexes that are Section 8, and they know in 5 years the Section 8 is going to expire. And so at that point, they can move the rents from whatever Section 8 was paying to market rent, which is usually a good bump. And of course, lots of local laws apply depending on where you are. So you have to know what they are. But my 2 cents is that if you know your particular area, Section 8 can be a good investment. Simply because you're being paid predictably. And there's always the chance of bumping it up to market rent at some point. But I'll put that on the list to find a good speaker who can give more info.
Hey, thanks. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Anybody else have thoughts on Section 8 or a different topic? All right. If you want to hear a different topic, let us know. Otherwise, I'll jump into how to underwrite a commercial property. And one thing that I'll say too, I think you all know, and usually I don't have this background up for the Intel REI Club, but I have a company called Good Samaritan Capital where we invest in multifamily properties. Right now, we're actually branching out into different types of properties and different asset classes. Particularly, we're looking at commercial properties, warehouses. There are a lot of situations, warehouses this year have actually performed slightly better than multifamily properties. And so we're looking at different asset classes that are not so tightly squeezed, meaning the prices haven't gone up as much and there's still good cash flow. So in my opinion, those include self-storage, mobile home parks, particularly data warehouses, and other types of industrial warehouses. So we're looking at those a lot right now, but we have a history of doing multifamily. Currently, Good Samaritan Capital has a little over 2,600 units that we've purchased as general partners and have operated. Some of them have given regular distributions, and there have been a few of them that during the pandemic did not give regular distributions, and then they needed to wait until the refinance in order to make up the 8% preferred return. So we've had a fair number of lessons in terms of asset management and how to do that. And but here, this is actually a really interesting case. This property is the first property that we had under contract that we did not close on. I believe this was going to be our 14th acquisition. And it's an interesting story as to why we didn't close onto it. And I thought I'd share it here in addition to how we actually do the underwriting. So first of all, does anybody have any questions or any particular aspects they want to hear about commercial underwriting before I get started? And feel free to jump in and say anything if you want to at any point. Yeah.
I'm sure you're going to walk through the overview and how you drive through this. I'm wondering, especially as you're hovering over some of these sort of market area informational type links there, are you actually driving those into the modeling that set some sort of I don't know, I'm thinking Monte Carlo variability or whatever you've got to be able to, determine what's the likely like value modulated by what you've done purely on an NOI calculation.
So you're talking about a Monte Carlos evaluation, which is actually fairly popular.
Well, I'm just saying in general, like you've got a straight numerical calculation of NOI to cap rate to, price, et cetera. Then you've got stuff that is more qualitative that drives, in the environmental concerns, crime, whatever. Do you use those in this spreadsheet? And if you're just going to walk through it, tell me to shut up and I'll just shut up and watch. But if you're going to, do you include that into your modeling as a factor for what would otherwise be, or does that turn into something like occupancy, percentage, or how do you deal with that other sources of information?
So going through these areas right here, I think I just clicked on this, so the browser, it's coming up on my other monitor. It depends on, for each of these, they affect the model differently. So most of these right here, actually the one that probably affects the model the most is the flood plain. So if you go over to see if your property's in a flood plain or not, your insurance will change, of course, depending on whether it is. And honestly, it's not really in your control. The insurance providers will tell you that it's in a floodplain and what your price is. So these are more pre-qualification checks that don't necessarily go into the model, but they help you assess whether the area, if you go back to my 5 pillars of risk, now this is a different talk, but one of the first pillar is, of course, the sponsors, the people that run the deal. Second pillar is the market, and the market is going to be driven by crime, property reviews, address map, the job diversification in the area. There's a number of criteria that I use, which I go over in a different talk, in order to qualify an area. But and then, of course, the fourth pillar is the business plan. The third pillar is the business plan. The fourth pillar is the regulators, and the fifth pillar is the tax status. So most of these right here are for pre-qualification purposes. Oftentimes, if you are underwriting a property, you've gone through most of these already. So the way that we get information about a property is, first of all, I have partners who basically talk to brokers all day long. That's what they do. And they have units that are already in an area. So they know the area well. They've got a property manager. They've got a construction crew. They know the people to contact in these areas. And this is not the first property that they've purchased in these areas. So the first thing to do is you need to call up the broker and say, hey, I want to be on your list. And particularly if it's a broker that you've already purchased from. And if it's a broker that you've already purchased from, you hopefully have a pre-existing relationship with them. These brokers, they like to be taken out to breakfast or go golfing with them, or whatever it is you do to spend quality time with your broker, which is why I don't do it, because I have a job at Intel. But you need to get on their short list is the basics of it. And the way the brokers operate usually is when they get a property in, they have a short list of 5 to 10 people that they know that have already bought properties from them. Their time is very limited. They don't want to waste time on you if they know that you can't close on a deal. So if you've closed on a deal with them before, they're very likely to contact you first. If you haven't, they deal with a lot of tire kickers, and frankly, oftentimes they don't have a lot of patience for tire kickers. If it's your first time contacting a broker, honestly, you shouldn't really contact a broker just by yourself. You should find a partner who's already experienced and already has a relationship with that broker, and jump onto a call with them and the broker. That way the broker's got a connection knowing, oh, you're partnering with this person who I already have a relationship with. You're not wasting my time. So brokers range from friendly to kind of short, and they want to know that their time is not being taken advantage of. So once you get onto a broker's good list, they usually have 5 to 10 people. That's called the pocket listing. These are the pocket listing people, or the people that are on the short list. They'll send the property off to these people first. And the advantage to being on that list is that you get the initial round of bidding, which means the competition for the bid is not as great. So you might be able to bid slightly lower and your bid might be accepted. Or if it isn't accepted and none of the 5 to 10 people, are able to bid something that the seller wants to receive, then the broker will go to their general list and they may blast it out to, 5,000 people. In which case the competition becomes very heated, the price tends to go up. It's better if you can get it in that initial off-market or pocket listing. And you'll hear a lot of multifamily operators talk about off-market listings. That's exactly what they mean. That means that they were in those first rounds. They had some sort of initial relationship with the person. They weren't just on the person's email blast list. And hopefully it means they got a slightly better deal on it. So this purchase price here is the quick and dirty area for evaluating a property. Usually something like the name of the property, the number of units, of course, is key. The current physical occupancy. I should also say here at this point too, that a lot of people have asked me about mentorship. And in the past, I have said that I'm starting my mentorship program. This time I am starting it in 2 weeks. So if you're interested in a mentorship program, come talk to me and we can do that. But basically the mentorship program will be every week going over for about 8 weeks, going over the different portions of evaluating a commercial property, starting from broker relations to how do you underwrite, how do you do your due diligence, how do you assemble a team, how do you look at the investment and legal side of it, how do you do the capital raising, how do you manage the asset. We'll go all the way through the process. So starting off here, getting this basic information in. C class is important to know. There's usually A, B, and C. A class is if you're in the Portland area and you're familiar with a Renco Park in that area, those are A class units. They're beautiful units. They command top dollar. They usually have a gym, an office area, a spa, a pool, whatever. And they often are not the greatest investments because it's like buying a brand new house, right? There's nothing to improve to add value to the house or to the apartments so that you can boost the value and give a good return to your investors. So we don't tend to go for A class. A classes are usually taken up by institutional money where they just need to park a lot of money. So you might have a hedge fund that needs to park $100 million. So they'll go in and buy 400 units of A-class property. So A-class you tend to be competing with people who have very deep pockets and who are willing to accept a much lower return than, frankly, you should as an investor. These A-class tends to give 3 to 5% return, maybe. B-class is a nice sweet spot. And it depends on which unit or what particular property you're getting, of course. But B class is usually 15 to 20 years old. It's usually in great condition. Somebody at Intel or somebody who's got a good job would live there. It's a nice place. It may not have a gym, might not have a pool or something like that, but it's still a really nice apartment complex and a place that a blue collar worker would enjoy living. These provide good opportunities because usually after 15 to 20 years, there's some need for renovation, although it might be a light renovation, might be just pulling out carpets, painting, maybe changing the counters, updating a few appliances, giving the room LED lights and a lighting makeover. It's a fairly low maintenance renovation that'll run $5,000 to $7,000 a unit. That's more of a mid-range renovation if you're doing that. It could be $3,000 to $5,000. That could be considered a light range renovation. And the key here is that you need to find a property whose rents are currently below market. And so if at any time I'm saying something, you have a question, I know I tend to talk continuously, just feel free to interrupt me. I see that there's some things in the chat here that I haven't been looking at. Okay, motels and office. Okay, we can bring those in as later talking points. So B class is great. It gives you a good opportunity. Let's say that your rents are $800 $800 for a 2-bedroom in a particular metro area. $800, you're probably looking at a Midwestern apartment, or maybe somewhere that's down towards the Southeast. Anywhere in Arizona, Texas, Florida, it's going to be quite a bit more than that. And of course, on the East and West Coast, it's going to be quite a bit more than that. But let's just say a 2-bedroom is $800, and that's $200 below market value, meaning that other fully updated 2-bedroom apartments in that area rent for $1,000. That's what you're looking for. You're looking for an opportunity to come in, buy at a lower price, put some improvement money into the property, and then boost it. So, and then that's what a B class is. That's what the value add is for a B class. That's also what the value add is for a C class. C class properties are, of course, more, I'm sorry, blue collar. I said blue collar earlier, I meant white collar. C class are more blue collar. You're going to get hourly wage earners here, people that are maybe in seasonal industries like the oil industry, where there's on times and off times. You're going to get more people that are potentially laid off faster, or might run into economic hard times faster. It's one of the reasons why B is kind of a sweet spot, because these people tend to have good, high-paying jobs that usually are more secure. So that's the difference between these. Now, you can have different variations of them. There can be like a C+ place that once renovated might be considered a B-. It's all very subjective as to whether it's A, B, or C. And there's no hard and fast rule, but those are the general rules that I just gave.
And
So the
typically
first,
Hey, Daniel. So typically in a value add type of investment, your thesis generally is trying to find C's that have potential to be B's, in both what you're looking for in terms of rent delta, as well as what the market area pricing might
Yeah.
return in terms of appreciation. Yeah.
although I would say in times like these where there's more economic uncertainty, we Good Samaritan Capital and my partner Jason Teely over at Leap Multifamily, we have the thesis of flight to quality properties. We're looking more for B- that can be improved to B+. People that are usually white collar workers that are more economically resistant to downturns. So that's the risk with a C class property, is it does vacancy will tend to go up in economic downturns more so than a B class. And also in an A class, vacancy tends to go up because suddenly people can't afford the rent up there. So they tend to move to the B class. So the B class is kind of a sweet spot in more economically troubled times.
You are trading return for quality as you're moving from C to B to A. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
Looking for C's at the tail end of the downturn cycle that's got occupancy issues, et cetera, might be, also something that, as you're moving away from quality back down to risk again, right? Yeah, I'm assuming that's part of the same thesis.
Yeah, each quality, each class that comes down should have a higher return. So an A is going to have the lowest return, a B is going to have a solid mid-range return. C will have your highest returns, but also it's the largest amount of work and the largest amount of risk.
Hey, Daniel.
So, yeah.
This is Henry. Question about the A, B, and C. Is that mostly related to like location, I would assume, or would you have like a good location will actually have a C class unit? So I would think it's mostly location, right?
It's actually more, honestly, it relates more to the age of the property.
Okay.
It also takes in location as well. I mean, if all the jobs in the area are hourly jobs, then most likely it's a C-class property. But C-class properties tend to be 1990 and older, maybe mid-90s and older.
Yeah.
So they're older properties that you want to update a lot. And the B class are slightly.
But you said he would go with us.
Yep. So yeah, that's the overview of class properties.
Thank you.
Let me jump over to our rental info, because this is a fascinating portion of our spreadsheet. So this is where whenever you're talking to a broker, there are two pieces of two documentations that you're really looking for. You're looking for the rent roll, which is a listing of all the current residents, which units they're in and how much they're paying, and when their contract starts and when their contract stops. It's the rent roll. And then you're also looking for what's called the T12 or the trailing 12. And that's the last 12 months worth of income and expenses. And if you can get a T24 or a T36, get as much of that info as you can, but you need at least a T12. And based on those things, based on the rent roll, you can start to fill this in. Let me make this a little bigger. I don't know if people have trouble seeing this or not. So what we do here is we want to model each different layout of apartment complex. We want to know exactly how many square feet it is, the price per square feet, the rent that you're getting at the current market rate. We also want to know when we purchase this, what do we believe we will be able to set the rent to without renovations and what the price per square foot is. And then, of course, to be renovated, what we believe we can get after the property is renovated, after the unit is renovated. So we model all three of these, and we also make sure that we go over to here to understand how many units are we renovating. It's very common actually to have 80% of your units renovated. Oftentimes you want to renovate a large amount of it to make the property go up in value, but you also want to leave a reason for a potential buyer to come in and buy it. Some buyers don't want to do 80% of the units. A lot of them just want to do 10 or 20%. So you do what's called, at least in the industry, leaving meat on the bone. You don't want to chew all the meat off of the bone yourself. You want to leave something for the next buyer so that they are incentivized to buy it from you. So it's very common actually to have 80%. Here we've modeled 100%. But it just depends on your business plan as to how many you're doing. So we'll come in here, we'll add in the description, the number of bedrooms and bathrooms, how many units in the property are like this or have this particular floor model, and what their square feet is. And then these other, the current market rent is this, you can pull directly off the rent roll. And pro forma, this you contact your property manager in the area, or you go to, if you have a data subscription to CoStar or Yardi Matrix. Those are two data services that will provide this type of data. So, and if you don't have, this type of data, you can always just call up your competitors in the area and ask them what they're renting their property for, their particular size units for. So you get this either by calling around to different apartments in the area, or by a subscription to a data service, or from a property manager who knows. And you can fill this out. And the same goes with the to be renovated area units. You can get this from a property manager who knows, hey, if you renovate it, you're going to get $200 more a month than if you don't. You can probably also get this from CoStar or Yardi. Yardi is a little more trustworthy because Yardi's business actually has a property management division, whereas CoStar's data is all based off of surveys. So CoStar tends to have, it's not quite as precise as Yardi's or as high quality. So then you come over and say how much you think each unit will cost to renovate. And of course, you'll go through with your general contractor in order to come up with this number after due diligence. And then you can model exactly how much money it will take to renovate each of these different types. So the cost per unit multiplied by how many units you have over here. And then what you want to do is you want to start phasing these in, because in reality, obviously you're not going to have these all renovated at the same moment. You can't just bump the rents up. They're going to be renovated over time. And depending on how many units your construction crew can renovate per week or per month, you need to start modeling that out. So that's what we do down here. We say, hey, how many units do you think can be modeled in a month? So this is actually kind of a slow renovation, 2.6, 2.6, 2.6. This renovation here, oftentimes you can, if you've got a larger construction crew, you can get 5 to 8 fairly comfortably within a month. And of course, adding these all together, actually that does add up to 5 to 8 right here. So you phase in the units that are being renovated. Your first week or 2 weeks, you're going to be changing over the accounting system, and you're going to be sending in people that are initially doing the quick and the fixes that need to be done, like ASAP, leaky roofs, plumbing that's not good, fixing the sign out front to make the curb appeal better. Those tend to be the sorts of things, and fixing the curb appeal of the property is usually one of the first things you do when taking over the property, just so you get more foot traffic in through the property. After that, and again, I feel like I'm talking a lot, so feel free to stop me at any point. Otherwise, I'm just rambling.
Yeah, I'm going to ask a question, Dane.
Yeah.
Maybe you're getting there, but this is projecting your rehab capacity per month.
Mhm.
It's not directly tied to your renovated pro forma inclusion on the time series of money.
Oh,
Right,
it
so-
absolutely is. It
So
absolutely
you're,
is.
you're pulling that into another spot, I'm guessing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay,
So,
all right,
so
cool.
each month as we're renovating units, those units are going offline for a certain amount of time, and then they're coming back online at full market price. So that needs to be modeled and built. Actually, it's just right down here, the renovation schedule for current
Perfect,
cash flow. So you actually build that into your model. And maybe what I should do here is really quickly go over the different tabs that are at the bottom so people get an overview of where we're going. This models the renovation of units and the amount of cash flow that they will provide to the overall project value. Loan and equity, this is going to model your loan. So you might model that you are getting a bridge loan, which I can talk about what that is in a moment. Basically a bridge loan, Fannie and Freddie Mac will not loan to you if your occupancy is lower than 90%. And oftentimes, if you're buying a property that is somewhat distressed, your occupancy is lower than 90%. So you go to the secondary loan market, and these are called bridge loans. They bridge you from your current wherever you're at to basically Fannie and Freddie Mae or agency debt, as it's called. Bridge loans tend to be slightly higher interest rates. They're not hard money rates. They're, what's the modeled rate here? It is cap rate at refi. I'm losing the. Oh, here it is, 3.8 for this one. So this one's a little older. Right now, I'd move that up to 5.5, frankly. So hard money loans tend to have a higher interest rate, but they also have very few prepayment penalties. And that's what the key is once you get your renovation done, you want to pay off that higher interest rate loan and then move it over to agency debt from Fannie or Freddie Mac. Fannie and Freddie Mac are going to have lower interest rates, but they also tend to have higher prepayment penalties. And so you'll have to take into account your prepayment penalties. And that's a whole lecture. Prepayment penalties on loans are more complicated than you would think. This also will model a refinance at a certain point. So if you are moving from your bridge loan to a longer term loan, usually when you change from one loan to another, you've already improved the value of your property. So the second loan is based on the improved value of your property, and being able to refinance at a higher value means that you can return some of your investors' initial capital to them. So you do a refinance cash out, basically, and return money to the investors. And then usually also it cash flows better after the refinance. All right, so capital events and fees. These are assumptions about how fast you think the property will increase or decrease in value. We actually model a 0.1% cap rate. It's an increase in cap rate, but a decrease in price. So we actually model that the price will go down slightly throughout the entire loan. And the reason, and this is the market rate for cap rates. So what's happening is we're improving the value of the property through renovation, while at the same time the market's going down. That's how we tend to model. What your preferred return is to your investors. So investors are guaranteed the first 8% of the income the property produces. And when that income comes in, they receive that first before any other income is paid out to any other parties. Usually the way that the income is allocated when it comes into a multifamily property is the very first thing you need to do is make sure your property is well capitalized. So there's actually, if we go over to detailed budget here, there's an amount per door that is set aside for repairs and maintenance. So that goes first. If you have an air conditioner that breaks, you need to have the cash on hand to fix it immediately. Otherwise, you'll start getting bad reviews. Your occupancy will go down. Bad things happen when your property is not well capitalized. And then the second thing, once you have a well capitalized property, is that you can begin returning money to your investors. So that's the preferred return. Money is paid out to the investors until 8% is reached. And then at that point, you can either put additional capital. Let's say you're getting 10% cash on cash in. You can pay 8% out. You can use the other 2% to accelerate your renovations, because if you accelerate your renovations, you will have more units that are renting at a higher value over time, and it actually boosts the overall return of the investment. And then once you have a other income and expense statement modeled out for a single year over both your current, over what the property is currently doing, what you believe the property will do in terms of a pro forma, and what a fully renovated property will do, you can start phasing in your rental info here. So you can start phasing this into a 5 to 7 year timeline. In this case, we have 6 years in, but you can increase that to 7, and it'll model it out over 7.
Hey, Daniel.
Yeah.
So say, you talked about the preferred return. Say you had more return than that. Are there other cases where you wouldn't do like accelerated renovations? Like what would you do instead?
Well, accelerated renovations are always the best thing to do, sometimes even at the expense of the initial preferred return. Preferred return, you should think about it as money that's owed to you each year. So you get a 8% preferred return each year, and it may or may not be paid out that year, but it is due to you before anything else is paid out. So instead of accelerating renovations, honestly, you want to accelerate renovations because that's going to boost your overall return on the whole investment. So as much as you can boost renovations, that's really what you should be putting your money into. And then once renovations are finished, which is usually 1.5 to 2 years into the project, depending on your construction and renovation timelines, then you pay your full amount out to your investors. You may pay more than the preferred return out if there's more cash flow. But then at that point, also, there's often what's called a GP catch-up. The general partners don't share in any of the cash flow until after all the renovations are complete, and maybe not even then. So general partners tend to be compensated at the end of the lifetime of the investment. So at the point where renovations are completed, some groups will do what's called a GP catch-up, where the general partners get paid up to 8% or whatever it happens to be. And then they're on basically an equal amount has been paid to the LPs and the GPs. And then the cash flow is just split between the two going forward. That's one way of doing it. There are different ways, but basically it either goes towards the property or towards the investors. You always want to make sure that your reserves are topped off. You never know when you're going to have a roof problem or a fire or a flood or something that may require a little extra capital, or COVID, which hit us on a property pretty hard. We had a renovation crew. We had supplies that took 2 months to come in. Right as the supplies came in, our whole renovation crew went down with COVID. And then as they were coming back, like another part of the renovation crew went down. So we were down for like 4.5 to 5 months with this particular project, and that happens. And so the investors are due their 8% during that time, but since the renovations weren't taking place, that 8% was not able to be accumulated within the property during the time that the renovation crew was not working. So what happens is that you want to redouble your effort to pour money into renovations, get your project timeline back on track, And then once it is, you begin paying out that 8% that is due to your investors as their preferred return. And sometimes that happens after the refinance.
Hey, Daniel, question on GPs versus LPs, right? So I've always been an
Yeah.
LP.
Yeah.
When you say 8% of the GP, is that 8% of what the GP put into the investment?
No. There's a whole discussion we can have on GP versus LP liquidity. Usually the main distinction between a GP liquidity and LP liquidity is that LP liquidity, or equity rather, LP equity is equity that you pay for. GP equity is equity that you work for. And so, for instance, myself as a GP on these properties, there's a certain portion of the general partnership that gets aligned to me from my work. But if I put money into the property, I also own a section of the LP. So oftentimes GPs are both GPs and LPs. Does that answer your question?
It does. So the 8% then, what is that 8% based on? Is it the
That-
GP equity?
The 8% that I pulled out there for the GP was a magic number. I just pulled that out of thin air. There's usually a compensation schedule that's part of the investor report, and it's not always 8%. Oftentimes it can be 8% to the investors first, and then a catch-up amount so that GPs and LPs have been paid the same amount pro rata according to the amount of equity they have, and then it's just a 80-20 split or a 70-30 split, where LPs get 70%, GPs get 30%. And that particular split is always talked about in the investor presentation whenever you see it.
Got it. Okay. So the GPs are making money once the LPs are paid out, and you're hoping at some point you're basically getting an infinite return because you don't have any investment in on the GP side.
Yeah, there's no investment in, although there's certainly time
There's
investment.
time in, right? Exactly.
Yeah, actually, I've been considering whether I'm doing more, frankly, as LP because GP is a significant time investment. Go ahead.
I was going to say, you're also, if I remember correctly, in some of these contracts, right? GPs typically also have like a fee that's paid out at close.
Yes.
Once that milestone hits. So if I remember correctly, you
Yeah.
could effectively participate as an LP for, a typical tranche. And you're going to pull most, if not all of that back out at a close fee. And then you're participating as an LP and GP both.
Yeah. So you're talking about the acquisition fee here, which we model out. 2% is a fairly common acquisition fee. This usually when GPs find a property, it's not uncommon for us to find the property 4 to 5 months before we close. We've underwritten 40 or 50 other properties, meaning we filled out this whole spreadsheet 50 times for other properties that didn't pencil out. So there's a significant time investment both with the brokers and with the underwriting. As an engineer, I kind of like the underwriting because numbers. Then this is also to compensate for all the lawyers' fees. Lawyers in a deal like this can run anywhere from $20,000 to $50,000, depending on exactly how you're structuring the deal. So you usually have some lawyers' fees that are involved, and then due diligence. The whole GP team usually flies out to the property, does a walkthrough with property inspectors, and then also gets reports from the electrical, plumbing, sewage, HVAC inspectors, and the roofing inspector. So all of those are upfront costs that need to be paid for. And the acquisition cost is the way of paying the general partners basically for that time and expense of going through and finding and putting together the deal. And this is usually paid out $392,000. There's often 5 to 6, 7 general partners. So it gets divided up amongst them depending on their percentage ownership of the GP credit. And yeah, we can go into waterfalls,
Daniel,
but I'm sorry, what?
A question. So you said this property didn't close, right? So in that case, how does this fees get split? Does the LPs take a hit there or the GP?
Yeah, so let me go into the story of this property. So, and I completely blame our lawyer, frankly. So we had raised all the equity that we needed to close on this property. And we also had a rather large 1031 exchange coming into the property for $3 million. And the 1031 exchange was actually from another apartment complex that was being sold. And there were 3 general partners that were part of that, and as well as a number of LPs that were part of this. And our lawyer called us up 4 days before closing and said, oh no, the structure of your 1031 exchange is not compatible with the current legal structure that we have set up for this property. And basically it boiled down to all of the general partners would have to agree to come over from one property to another. But before that, we had the understanding that only 2 of the general partners wanted to come over and the third wanted to take his portion and put it somewhere else. And so 4 days before the property closed, our lawyer called us up and gave us bad news. And so we scrambled for about a day trying to raise $3 million in 4 days, and it didn't happen. So what ended up happening was, as the general partners, we all had approximately $400,000 of earnest money that we had put into the deal. We all lost our earnest money. Some partners put in more than others. The limited partners got 100% of their money back. We just wired it back to them. And the deal didn't go through. So what happened here is that 2 of the partners in this large 1031 exchange wanted to move forward and go into this property. And the third one, who was my previous mentor, Mark Kenny, did not want to go into it because he had other deals that were going on. And so because there wasn't a full agreement on the general partnership, the 1031 exchange could not move into this. We lost $3 million of the money that we thought we had raised, and we were not able to bring enough to the closing table. So, and that's what happened. So when that didn't happen, that happened on a Friday. And then so Monday, I called up the general partners, or emailed them. I'm sorry, not the general partners, the limited partners, and emailed them and said, here's the situation. We're going to be sending your money back to you. And yeah, and then they had their money sent back to them. So that was the first property that we hadn't closed. It was a good learning experience. Basically, anytime that you have private equity, if you go with a private equity group that's bringing in a large portion of your raised check, or a 1031, if there's a legal problem, there's always a possibility that a large amount of your equity disappears and you're not able to bring enough money to the closing table. And that's a risky run.
Hey, Daniel.
Yeah.
So in this case, so that you said the general partners were the ones who got impacted.
Yeah.
But the limited partners, are they like safe?
Absolutely. Yeah, they're safe. We both ethically and legally must give them all their money back. and even if those weren't the requirements, I would still do that, because it's they're putting money in. If it doesn't go through, they get their money back. Yeah. So yeah.
And Daniel, what could have been what was it the lawyer who wasn't paying attention, or doing?
Yes, it was the lawyer that wasn't paying attention. He should have told us that a long time ago. And
the structure of the
So is there like insurance, Daniel, or would the lawyer get sued, or is it just a mistake and then we just keep going, learn from it?
Yeah, it's just a mistake. You
just learn from it. Okay.
Part of the business is that sometimes you close and sometimes you don't, and the lawyer still gets paid either way, but the general partners lose their earnest money. And of course, the seller wants to sell, and he doesn't get to sell. So he doesn't, although he's receiving a good portion of that earnest money. So I guess he's happy.
But then wouldn't this open it up for someone else to make the deal, or would you guys get a chance to do it again later? Or
the seller would put it back onto the market. Odds are the seller would probably not accept us as the bid, the winning bid, because we failed to go through last time. But they would put it back onto the market, and somebody else would go through the whole process again. And the reason why a seller doesn't want to do that is because the whole process can take 2 to 3 months or more minimum to go through. And you have to have another buyer do all the due diligence. You have to have another buyer raise the equity. It's a long process. So sellers often are fairly disappointed even if they receive the earnest money.
As a GP, can you recoup any of that loss or write it off, or how, like what's the recourse there for you as a GP?
Well, it's I mean it's a loss to our businesses, so I mean I suppose it's a tax loss, I suppose, but it's certainly not worth it. No, for the most part you just lose it. And that's part of the risk we take, and that's also why there's an acquisition fee. We do take risk in putting these deals together.
And the seller, if there's a reset, then it's another couple of months. They're not inclined to make any extensions for the current deal.
We actually had one extension that we had negotiated within our contract, and we had used it, and it was 4 days until the final closing date when our lawyer came back and told us about it.
Got it.
Yeah.
So Daniel, that means you have another lawyer now? Is that what I'm assuming?
Yeah, it depends. So I work with about 5 or 6 groups, and it's probably moving forward. We're 5 to 6. There's one group I'm considering not working with because they didn't do their monthly reports as timely as I'd like. But basically each group kind of has their own lawyer, and I've liked some lawyers better than others. This particular lawyer was the lawyer that was involved in my group, Think Multifamily, and I'm no longer associated with that group because a lot of the people that are there are new at running properties, and you find some good people and find some that are not as good. And so I've found some good partners now, and I've exited the group, and I'm staying with them for the most part. So we just did some deals down in Phoenix with Rise 48 and FTW out of Kansas City. Great groups. Anyway.
So Daniel, you said the general partners have an option to do the 1031 exchange, right? So does that same option goes for LPs as well?
Yes.
When a property goes a full cycle?
Well, so there's 2 different types of 1031 exchanges, and the one that we thought we were doing was called a drop and swap. And the basic idea there is the legal structure is set up so that the general partners can go back to the limited partners and say, hey, we've arranged a 1031 exchange. You can move your investment forward into a new property and defer your capital gains taxes, or you can exit the deal right here at this point, pay your capital gains taxes, and not go into the next property. And basically the way that you do that is the general partners are going to raise equity for the second property, use that equity to buy out the limited partners in the first property. They exit. So they're exiting before the exchange takes place. Once all the LPs that want to leave have left, then the general partners and the limited partners all move over as a single group, which is a requirement of a 1031. So that's the most common way that 1031 exchanges happen with larger properties. And I've got a whole presentation on that too. All right, where were we? Loan modeling. What would you guys like to see here? A detailed budget is kind of interesting. Usually the way that commercial properties are underwritten is you start with the maximum amount of profit. Oh, I see that we're almost to the hour. I can talk a lot. If you're interested, come to my mentorship group. You go for the top amount of rent that you can possibly get. So if your property is 100% occupied at top market rent, the gross potential market rent, or the potential market rent, or gross potential rent, sometimes called, is the maximum amount you can expect to receive on your property over a year's time, or a month's time, depending on how you're modeling it. And then then from that number, you begin subtracting what you realistically think you're missing. So here, economic vacancy. Economic vacancy means, hey, normally I could rent the 2-unit for $1,000 a month, but right now I'm only getting $900 a month. So therefore I have 10% economic vacancy. or $100 per month worth of economic vacancy. So economic vacancy is the amount between what you're currently renting and the market rate. And then you subtract real vacancy, which of course, units that aren't occupied. Concessions, let's say that you're running a deal and you want to get people in and you give them first month free or half a month free, whatever your concessions tend to be. Non-revenue units, these can be units that were converted over to office spaces or laundromats or other things. Collection loss, sometimes not everybody pays everything. So there's a certain percentage that tends to be. So you add all of, you take the top number and then start subtracting off of it what you realistically have according to your rent roll and your T12. Then you go in and you add on other income. Like for instance, hey, if there's a parking space, maybe you're charging $20 a month for a parking space. And people who don't have a parking space just get to park wherever they can find one. So that might be extra income. You might rent out storage units. Utilities are an interesting proposition with multifamily properties, because sometimes if the meters on the building are just 1 meter for the whole building, you can bill, you can approximate what you think each person will use, say, I don't know, $30 a month for water. And what tends to happen though is that when a renter is not directly responsible for the amount of water that they use, they're not billed according to that, people take long showers and there tends to be more water waste. And so one way to actually improve a property is to go in and take a meter that's on the whole building and do what's called sub-metering. Sub-metering, you hire a contractor to come in, they're going to sub-meter the whole place. And then units can be individually billed for the amount of electricity or fuel or water, or other things that they're using. It tends to save water. Often at the same time, we actually go in and install low flow toilets and things that save water. So that tends to save water. Plus, you know exactly the amount that is being used. So you can set up what's called a utility buyback or a RUBS program. And that's where you know exactly what they've used. So you just bill them that amount. So that can be considered extra income because you're paying it up front and then you're collecting the water bill from them, basically as part of the rent. All right.
Daniel,
Yeah,
are you
we
allowed
got 4
to
minutes left.
Yeah, are you allowed to charge an extra fee for setting that up, or no? Or do you have to only or can you only charge what they consume?
Yeah, usually it just comes out of the renovation budget. So
Okay.
we'll raise equity before the close. And the way the banks handle equity is the bank is obviously the biggest investor. They tend to give you 70 to 75, maybe even 80% of the value of the property in terms of a loan. And so they want to see your renovation plan ahead of time. They also take your entire renovation budget at closing and they put it into an escrow account. The bank actually controls the renovation budget. And so what the general partners do is we pay out of money that we've raised a second time. Let's say we need to renovate one unit and it costs $7,000. We pay for that $7,000 and then we submit a receipt to the bank saying, we did this, please reimburse us. That's how that system works. All right, we've got 2 more minutes. Just look at the summary here, I suppose. So the summary will give us a good summary of what the asking price is, the offer, the total cost with rehab, what the loan information is, what the refinance information is, how much equity there is in the property. So in other words, how much equity do we need to raise for this property? In this case, we needed to raise $6.8 million. And when 3 million is a 1031 exchange and it disappears, it's rather hard to replace quickly. And then what the cap rates are, so what the income to property values are and what you believe they will be when you sell, and all the different fees that are associated. And finally, that allows you to get down to these numbers right here, which are the ones that you put inside your investor presentation. You say, hey, I think I can pay and 9.8% cash on cash and have a 17% per year return. So that's how that works. Any questions?
Just real quick, the cash on cash, is that after a certain time, do you pay that quarterly, monthly, or
It depends on the deal. A lot of the times it's quarterly. It's just less work if it's quarterly, frankly, but it could be quarterly or monthly.
And then for the GP, you said you get paid at the end. Where does that come into the equation, or is that separate?
The general partners. So there's a whole talk here about waterfall structures that help you calculate, your preferred return for each different class of equity, and if you break 20% return, there's oftentimes what's called a hurdle, and when you're setting up the investment, you can say, hey, we have a hurdle at 20% or 25%, in which case maybe it goes from a 80-20 split to a 60-40 split above the hurdle. So it can get kind of complicated in calculating out what the payouts are for each person, but these two spreadsheets right here are exactly what that's for. Here's a good example of what a payout on a typical multifamily property looks like for cash on cash and investment proceeds. All right.
I had a last minute question.
Yeah.
So where do you get investors from?
So these are all 506B deals, which means that you need to set up a time with me to personally talk with me. We get to know each other's goals and see if it's the right fit for each other. But I basically talk to people one-on-one. And
Okay.
if they're a good fit, we put them on our investor email list.
And is there like investors have like, you have a criteria for the investors, like big investors, small investors, or?
Yeah, I like 506Bs because you don't have to be accredited to be in it. But if you want to invest $50,000 and you tell me that you only have $50,000 to your name, I'm not going to accept you as an investor. It needs to be money that you're comfortable with having,
Right.
gone for 5 to 7
I
years.
understand. Yep.
Yeah. And I think that should be true for any good general partner.
Right.
Hey, next week we have Alicia Jarrett.